His sister treated his black wife like a servant until the mafia boss came home early. She placed the apron on the counter like she was setting a trap. Not dropped it, not tossed it. Placed it, slowly, deliberately, the way you'd lay down a hand of cards you already know wins. Serena Jang smiled at her brother's wife with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes and said, "Since you're so determined to stay in this family, you should learn your place." Amara Whitfield Jang looked at the apron. White cotton. Folded neat. A message dressed up as fabric. She looked at Serena. Then she pushed it back across the counter. Quiet, steady, without a single word, and that small act of refusal changed everything that came after. If you were standing in that kitchen right now, knowing what was about to happen, knowing what this woman had already walked into and what was still coming, what would you do? Before we go further, if stories like this hit different, if you're the kind of person who believes a woman's dignity is non-negotiable, no matter whose last name she carries, hit that subscribe button right now and ring that bell. Leave a comment below with your city and country, because I want to know exactly how far this story travels. And if someone you know needs to hear this today, share it. Now let's go back to where it all started. The morning Kieran left for Detroit, Amara made him coffee the way she always did. 2 sugars, no cream, poured before it finished brewing because he liked it slightly bitter and slightly too hot. It was one of those small things that had nothing to do with being a good wife and everything to do with just knowing someone. 7 years of marriage had given her a whole catalog of small things like that. He stood in the kitchen doorway in his travel clothes, the dark charcoal suit that meant serious business, watching her pour. He had a phone in one hand and an expression on his face that she recognized as the one he wore when he was already somewhere else in his head, already in the room where the negotiation would happen, already calculating. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she repeated, handing him the mug. He took it, drank, and looked at her the way he sometimes did when words felt like too much work, a look that said things he wasn't particularly good at saying out loud. Kieran Jang was not a man who expressed himself easily. He was fluent in silence and in action, and after 7 years, Amara had learned to read both. "Marco's team will be on site," he said, meaning the security staff. "You need anything, you call Lee first, not the main line." "I know. Fridge is stocked. Don't let Mrs. Park pressure you into eating her dumplings for every meal. She makes very good dumplings. That's the trap she wants you to fall into." Amara smiled. It was an old joke between them, warm and worn smooth from use. She walked him to the front door. He kissed her once. Not a quick kiss. Not a distracted one. The kind that meant, "I see you standing here and I'm aware I'm leaving." Then he was through the door and down the stone steps, and she watched the black car roll down the long driveway until it disappeared beyond the iron gate. The estate sat quiet after that. It was a Wednesday. October. The kind of October morning where the light comes in flat and gray, and the trees outside the windows are doing that slow, theatrical thing where they let their leaves go one at a time, like they're not sure they're ready. Amara stood in the front hall for a moment, just breathing. She had learned to love this house slowly, the same way she'd learned to love the man who owned it. Neither had come easy. The house was enormous in the way that old money tried to be impressive. High ceilings, marble everything, rooms that echoed if you walked through them too fast. When Kieran first brought her here, she'd made the mistake of saying it felt like a hotel, and the expression on his face told her immediately that she'd said something wrong. He'd built this place from nothing, which meant from everything. From years she hadn't been present for, from decisions she didn't fully understand yet, from a version of himself that preceded her by a long, complicated decade. She'd apologized. He'd said she didn't need to. She'd apologized anyway, because she'd meant something true, and it had landed wrong. And Amara had always believed that the difference between an accidental wound and a deliberate one was whether you bothered to acknowledge the blood. That was the thing about her. She noticed. She paid attention to what she said and what it cost other people. It was not always a comfortable way to move through a world where a lot of powerful people didn't bother. She was in the sunroom with a book and a cup of tea going cold beside her when she heard the front gate chime. She assumed it was a delivery. She did not go to check. 3 minutes later, she heard the front door open with the specific click of someone who has a key. Only one person beside Kieran had a key to this house. Amara closed her book. Serena Jang walked into the sunroom like she owned it, which was not technically accurate but was the governing principle of her personality. She was 41, 2 years older than Kieran, and she wore that seniority the way some people wear jewelry, visibly, deliberately, as an announcement. She was dressed in a cream blazer and dark slacks, and her hair was pulled back with the kind of precision that takes 45 minutes to achieve while looking effortless. "Amara," she said, without hello, without any of the social warmth that Amara had never once received from her in 7 years. "Serena." Amara stood up because sitting felt suddenly like a disadvantage. "Kieran mentioned you might. My apartment's being redone, floors and walls. The smell alone is going to be unbearable for at least 2 weeks. She glanced around the sunroom with the expression of someone conducting an inspection. "I told Kieran I'd need to stay here." Amara kept her voice even. "He mentioned it was a possibility. He didn't confirm." "He confirmed it to me." Serena looked at her then, directly, with the particular quality of eye contact that is actually a test. "I assume that's sufficient." It wasn't a question. Amara recognized that immediately. And she recognized with the same quiet clarity that she recognized most things that this was the first move in something she hadn't agreed to play. She just didn't know the full game yet. "I'll have a room prepared," Amara said. "The East Guest Suite," Serena said. "The Blue Room. I always stay in the Blue Room." Amara had not been told there was a designated room. She filed that away. "I'll take care of it." Serena sat down, in the chair Amara had been sitting in, and pulled out her phone as though the conversation had ended because she'd decided it had. Amara picked up her cold tea and left the room. In the hallway, she exhaled once, long and slow, like releasing pressure from something that had been building since she heard the gate chime. She was not afraid of Serena. She had never been afraid of her. What she felt was closer to the sensation of seeing bad weather on the horizon. Not fear exactly, but the particular alertness that comes from knowing something is coming and knowing you don't fully control what it's going to do. She sent a text to Lee, Kieran's head of security, flagging that Serena was on site and asking if Kieran had confirmed the arrangement. Lee responded 20 minutes later that yes, Kieran had given verbal approval the week prior and had simply neglected to loop Amara in. Amara stared at that text for a moment, neglected to loop her in. 7 years. She still encountered sentences like that. She didn't respond to Lee. She put her phone in her pocket, went to prepare the Blue Room, and told herself that 2 weeks was not forever, and that she was capable of being in the same house as someone she didn't like for 2 weeks without losing any significant part of herself. She'd done it before. She could do it again. By Thursday evening, she understood that this time was different. The shift happened gradually, then suddenly, in the way that most things shift. Thursday morning, Serena came downstairs at 9:30 and asked Amara where the housekeeper was. Amara said Mrs. Park didn't come in until 10. Serena made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh and wasn't quite contempt, but lived in the neighborhood between them and poured her own coffee. Thursday afternoon, she asked Amara to call ahead to her favorite restaurant for a reservation Thursday night. "I'm not Kieran's assistant," Amara said. "I know that," Serena said pleasantly. "I'm asking you as a courtesy, since you live here." The "since you live here" landed with weight, as though Amara's presence in the house was an ongoing negotiation, a status that could be reviewed. Amara made the reservation, not because she felt she had to, because she was picking her battles, and a restaurant call did not rank high enough. Friday morning, she woke up to find Serena in the kitchen speaking to Mrs. Park in a low, firm voice. When Amara walked in, Mrs. Park was untying her apron. Her face was careful, closed, the face of a woman who has been told something and is trying not to show how it landed. "What's happening?" Amara asked. Serena turned. "I gave the weekend staff the time off. We don't need a full house when it's just the two of us." Amara looked at Mrs. Park. "Did Kieran authorize that?" "I authorized it," Serena said, still pleasant. "They're being compensated for the weekend, don't worry. I'm not unreasonable." Mrs. Park was already gathering her bag. She met Amara's eyes for a half second, an apology in there, and something else, something that looked like a warning, and then she was gone. The kitchen felt very large after that. Amara turned to look at Serena. "You don't have authority over this household staff." "Kieran gave me a key," Serena said. "He's my brother. I'm family. And I'm his wife." Serena looked at her then with something that dropped the pleasantness entirely, just for a second. something bare and cold underneath, like skin under a bandage. "Yes," she said, "you are." And she left the kitchen. Amara stood at the counter and felt the change settle into the room like a temperature drop. She understood now, fully, what she had only suspected before. Serena had dismissed the staff on purpose. She had planned this. By Friday afternoon, the first guests arrived. Amara didn't know they were coming. She was in the library when she heard voices in the foyer. Not one or two, but several, the low murmur of a social gathering being assembled. She came out to find 3 men and 2 women she didn't recognize being shown to the sitting room by Serena, who was performing hostess with the natural fluency of someone who'd done it in this house before Amara ever arrived. Amara stood in the hall doorway. Serena noticed her, smiled. "Amara, wonderful." She gestured toward her as though presenting a prop. "This is my brother's wife. She'll bring us some refreshments." The 5 strangers looked at Amara with the polite blankness of people who have not been given enough information to know how to react. Amara did not move. "I'm not sure what you'd like," she said to Serena, keeping her voice level. "But the kitchen is available if you want to have something prepared." "I'd like you to bring drinks," Serena said, still smiling. "That's all." There was a moment, brief, stretched, where the room sat between what Serena had said and what Amara would do. The 5 strangers were watching with suddenly increased attention. "I think," Amara said, "you have me confused with someone else." She turned and walked back down the hall, and she did not run, and she did not hurry, and her hands, when she reached the library and closed the door quietly behind her, were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of not becoming what this situation was trying to make her become. She sat down on the edge of the library couch and breathed. She thought about calling Kieran. She reached for her phone and then set it back down. He was in a negotiation. He told her not to call unless something was actually wrong. Was this wrong? It was wrong. But it was also the kind of wrong that would be very easy for someone else to look at and call manageable. A family member being difficult. A misunderstanding. An overreaction. She had spent 7 years learning exactly how quickly legitimate grievances became overreactions when they came from her. She picked up her book instead and did not go back out until she heard the guests leave 2 hours later. It was later, after dinner, after Serena had gone to the blue room and the house had settled into its nighttime silence, that Amara walked through the ground floor checking that everything was locked the way she always did. It was habit. Kieran had given her the code to the household security panel years ago, and she'd developed the routine on her own. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she was that kind of person, the kind who checked. She was passing Kieran's study when she noticed the door was ajar. She pushed it open. The desk lamp was on. That was wrong. Serena had no reason to be in here, and Amara had turned the lamp off herself that morning. She stepped inside, and that's when she saw it. The filing cabinet in the corner, the one Kieran kept locked, was unlocked. Not open. Locked, but not latched, the drawer sitting a quarter-inch proud of its frame, as though someone had been through it and not quite pushed it fully closed. Amara stood very still in the middle of the study. She looked at the drawer. She looked at the desk. There was nothing visibly disturbed on the desk, but when she looked more carefully, she saw the slight misalignment. Papers that had been moved and replaced, not perfectly. She pulled the filing cabinet drawer open. The folders inside were Kieran's business records. She knew that much. She'd never gone through them. That was his domain, his world, and she had always kept a careful and deliberate separation between herself and the operational part of who her husband was. Not from ignorance, from choice. She knew what Kieran did. She had made her peace with it. But she had also made a principle. She would not be a person who inserted herself into parts of a life she hadn't earned access to. Tonight she made an exception, because someone else had already been in here. She went through the folders carefully. Most of them meant little to her. She wasn't a financial expert, wasn't trained to read corporate structures, didn't have the background to understand the full architecture of what she was looking at. But she understood enough. She had a business degree. She had used it before she married Kieran, in a career that felt like someone else's life now. She understood enough to recognize, in the third folder she opened, that several of the company names were ones she didn't recognize. Subsidiary structures nested inside legitimate holdings, running transactions she couldn't trace to anything real. The numbers were large. The dates were recent. The name on the authorization line, repeated across 6 separate documents, was not Kieran's. It was Serena's. Amara stared at those pages for a long time. Then she took out her phone and photographed every one of them, quietly, methodically, the flash off. She replaced each folder exactly as she'd found it. She pushed the cabinet drawer almost, but not quite, to latched. She left the study. She was halfway across the marble foyer when she heard Serena's voice behind her. "What were you doing in there?" Amara turned. Serena was standing at the base of the main staircase in a silk robe, her arms crossed. Her hair was down now. Without the blazer, without the performance of daytime Serena, there was something stripped and mean about her face. "Checking the house," Amara said, "with your phone out." The two women looked at each other, and Amara understood. Looking at Serena's face in that moment, at the specific quality of alertness there, the calculation already running, that she was standing in something much larger than a sister-in-law's cruelty. This was not about disrespect. This was about evidence, and Serena had just realized that her scapegoat had found it. The silence between them lasted exactly long enough to become something else. Not a pause. A standoff. Serena's eyes dropped to Amara's phone, just for a second, just a flicker, and that single movement told Amara everything she needed to know about how bad this actually was. Because Serena Jang was not a woman who let things show on her face. She had spent 4 decades perfecting the architecture of her expressions. She controlled rooms, she controlled conversations, she controlled the temperature of every interaction she walked into. That flicker was not control. That flicker was fear wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. "You went through his files," Serena said. Her voice was still level, still measured, but there was something underneath it now. A current, low and dangerous, like the hum of a wire that's carrying more than it should. "I told you what I was doing," Amara said. "You were checking the house." Serena's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. "With your phone camera active." The lamp was on in his study. The drawer wasn't latched, and that required photography. Amara didn't answer that. She had learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do in a confrontation with someone like Serena was answer every question. Questions were not always questions. Sometimes they were hands reaching for something, leverage, a foothold, a way to reframe what you'd done so that it looked like what they needed it to look like. She kept her phone in her hand. She did not put it in her pocket. She did not move toward the stairs. She stood in the middle of that marble foyer with all that cold light overhead, and she waited. Serena took 3 steps down from the staircase. Slow steps. The kind of steps that are calculated to feel like approach without being close enough to be physical. "Give me the phone, Amara." "No." The word came out clean and simple and final, and Amara felt the faint vibration of it in her own chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but the particular steadiness that comes from saying something true. Serena's jaw shifted. A micro movement. Something tightened under her cheekbones. "Those are confidential family records," she said. "You had no right to photograph them. You had no right to be in that room. Kieran gave me access to every room in this house." "Kieran gave you access to this house?" Serena said, and the emphasis on this was precise, scalpel thin. "Not to his business, not to his financial records, not to things you don't understand and wouldn't know what to do with." "I have a business degree," Amara said. "I understand more than you're comfortable with right now." Serena was quiet for 2 full seconds. Those 2 seconds were the loudest thing in the room. Then she changed tactics. Amara could see it happen, the visible shift, the way a person rotates when the angle they were pushing from isn't yielding. Serena's shoulders came down a fraction. Her voice dropped half a register. She became, in the space of a breath, someone who was simply worried. "Look," she said, "I know we've never been close. I know this hasn't been easy, but those documents, if they end up somewhere they shouldn't, if they're misunderstood by someone who doesn't have full context, it could cause serious problems for the family. For Kieran. You understand that?" "I understand that you've been running transactions through his companies," Amara said. "I understand your name is on 6 authorization forms that don't appear to correspond to any legitimate business activity. And I understand that you were in his study before I got there, which means you already knew those documents were there and you were hoping I wouldn't find them." The soft performance collapsed. Serena looked at her with her actual face for the first time that entire weekend. Not the composed face, not the contemptuous face, not the pleasant to a point face. The real one. And the real one was not soft, and it was not reasonable, and it was not the face of a woman who was simply worried about her family. It was the face of someone recalculating how bad a situation has just gotten. "You have no idea what you're looking at," Serena said. "Then explain it to me." "I don't owe you an explanation." "No," Amara said. "You owe Kieran one." Serena crossed the rest of the foyer in 4 fast steps and held out her hand. "The phone." "No." "Amara, you can call Kieran right now," Amara said. "You can tell him you dismissed his staff, used his house to host guests without notice, and that I found documents in his study that have your name on them. You can do that. I'll stand right here." Serena's hand was still out. Her breathing had changed. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but Amara could see it. The slight elevation, the chest moving a little faster than before. "You think he'll take your side," Serena said. "I think he'll want to see the documents." "You don't know my brother. I've been married to him for 7 years. 7 years, Serena repeated, and the way she said it, flat, weighted, like a stone dropped into water, made the number sound temporary. "You think 7 years makes you family?" Amara held her phone a little tighter. She held her voice a little tighter, too. "I think 7 years makes me his wife, and I think that means something different to him than it does to you, or we wouldn't be having this conversation." Serena's hand dropped. She stood there for a moment that felt longer than it was, and then she turned and walked back to the staircase, and she climbed it without saying another word, and Amara listened to her footsteps cross the upper floor and the blue room door close with a firmness that was not quite a slam, but wanted to be. Amara stood alone in the foyer. She looked down at her phone. The photographs were there, 12 images, slightly angled, the flash-off quality making them look like evidence from a crime scene, which was maybe not the wrong frame for what they were. She thought again about calling Kieran. She thought about what he'd said. Call Lee first, not the main line. She thought about what Lee would do. Relay a message, filter it, make a professional judgment about whether it warranted interrupting a negotiation. Lee was loyal to Kieran first, the family structure second, and Amara third, in that order. He had never been rude to her. He had also never once treated her as the authority she technically was. She went to bed. She didn't sleep much. Saturday arrived with a flat gray sky and the specific kind of quiet that sits in a large house when the usual people aren't in it. No Mrs. Park. No weekend groundskeeper. No low background noise of people doing the ordinary work of maintaining a place this size. Just the house and its 2 occupants and the thing that had happened the night before, which neither of them had resolved, and both of them were now carrying through the morning. Amara came downstairs at 7:30. She made her own coffee. She sat at the kitchen island and looked out the window at the garden going dormant in October, the last of the color draining out of it, and she thought clearly and without drama about her options. She could leave, pack a bag, call a car, go to a hotel until Kieran came back Sunday night. That was the cleanest move, the most conflict-averse move, the move that didn't escalate anything. It also meant leaving the house, her house, because someone else had made it uncomfortable. It meant Serena would have the run of the estate for the remainder of the weekend, including the study, including the filing cabinet she hadn't quite latched. She could stay and do nothing, ride out the weekend, keep her distance, hand the photographs to Kieran when he returned and let him deal with it. The problem with that was the photographs. Serena knew she had them. Serena was, right now, in the blue room on the 2nd floor, thinking about those photographs and what to do about them. And a woman who had already demonstrated she was willing to move millions through shell companies and frame a paper trail was not a woman who would simply wait to see what happened. She could call Kieran now. Amara wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and considered that one for a long moment. She had spent 7 years not calling Kieran over things involving Serena. Minor things, medium things. The comment at the holiday dinner in year 2. The incident at his aunt's birthday, where Serena spent 40 minutes talking about the woman Kieran had dated before Amara, as though Amara was not standing 3 feet away. The way Serena had twice in one summer referred to Amara's career before marriage as that little non-profit thing you used to do. Amara had swallowed every one of those, not from weakness, not from the habit of accepting bad treatment, but from a calculated understanding that calling Kieran every time his sister was difficult would eventually make her the problem in the story, instead of Serena. She was aware that this strategy had a cost. She was aware she had been paying it quietly for years, and that nobody, not Kieran, not anyone, had fully reckoned with what it had cost her. But this was different. This wasn't a comment. This wasn't a birthday party or a dinner table slight. This was fraud. She was reaching for her phone when she heard Serena on the stairs. Serena walked into the kitchen, dressed, composed, the blazer back on, the hair back up. She had reconstructed herself entirely. She looked like last night had not occurred, or like she had made a decision about how last night would be classified going forward, and the classification she'd chosen was manageable. She opened the refrigerator, looked inside, and said, without turning around, "There's no orange juice." "There wasn't any yesterday either," Amara said. "Mrs. Park usually keeps orange juice." "Mrs. Park isn't here. You sent her home." Serena closed the refrigerator. She turned around. She looked at Amara with an expression that was careful and pleasant in the surface layer way that a painted wall is painted. "I thought we could talk," she said, rationally, "about last night." "All right," Amara said. Serena pulled out a stool on the opposite side of the kitchen island and sat down. She folded her hands on the counter in front of her. It was a posture Amara associated with people who had prepared what they were going to say. "I know I've been difficult this weekend," Serena began. "Yes." A pause. She hadn't expected the unqualified agreement. She recovered. "I want you to understand, what you saw in those documents is not what it looks like. The company structures are complicated. What reads as irregular to someone without full context is actually part of a tax optimization arrangement that Kieran approved." She held Amara's gaze. "Approved personally, a year ago." Amara set down her coffee mug. "The authorization forms had your signature," she said. "Not Kieran's approval. Your signature. I have signatory authority on some of the subsidiaries. That's not unusual." "Serena, the authorization forms were dated 3 months ago, and I know what the main Jang family accounts look like, because I see the household budget drawn from them every month. Whatever those subsidiaries are, they're not on any document I've ever seen, which means either Kieran doesn't know they exist, or he knows and hasn't told me, and I think you're counting on me being unwilling to find out which one is true." Serena looked at her. Something moved across her face, quick, gone before it fully formed. It might have been respect. It might have been anger. It might have been the specific cold clarity of someone realizing they had underestimated a situation. "You should be careful," Serena said. "I'm careful every day," Amara said. "It hasn't protected me from much in this family." Serena's hands came apart on the counter. She sat back. She tilted her head very slightly the way a person does when they are recalibrating, when the approach they brought to a conversation isn't working and they're deciding whether to try another or to simply flip the table. She flipped the table. "You want to call Kieran?" she said. "Go ahead. Call him. Tell him you broke into his study, went through his private records, photographed documents you don't have clearance to access, and now you're sitting at his kitchen table making accusations about his family's finances based on your business degree." She let that land. "Let's see how that conversation goes." Amara said nothing. "He will come home. He will be furious, not at me, at you, because I will have had 3 hours to talk to him before he walks in that door. And I will tell him everything you've done this weekend with the particular framing that I choose. And you know what the problem is, Amara? You've spent 7 years being so careful, so quiet, so dignified about everything that nobody in this family actually knows what you want. Nobody knows what you stand for. Nobody knows who you are when it gets hard. Which means when I tell Kieran you've gone through his things and you're threatening his sister, he's going to have exactly 0 historical evidence to contradict me with." It was a good speech. Amara gave it that. It was also a threat that only worked if she was afraid of it. And she'd been afraid of exactly this scenario. The framing, the telephone call from Serena, the version of events that made her careful dignity look like secrecy for 7 years. And she was tired. She was genuinely, physically, deeply tired of managing her existence in this family around what Serena might say to her brother. "All right," Amara said, and she picked up her phone and she called Kieran. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. She looked at Serena. Serena's expression had shifted again. Quick recalculation, the realization that Amara had actually done it, that the bluff had not worked because it wasn't a bluff. Amara left a message. Her voice was steady. She said, "Kieran, I need to talk to you when you have a moment. It's not an emergency, but it is important. Call me back." She put the phone down on the counter. "There," she said. Now we wait. He didn't call back. Not in an hour. Not in 2. By noon, Amara had sent a text. Short, the same message essentially, call when you can. It matters. And the 2 gray check marks that meant delivered sat there all afternoon, not turning blue. He was in the negotiation. His phone was probably face down on a table in a room full of people who required his undivided attention. She knew this. She had been on the other side of this particular silence before, had sat waiting for a callback that came 4 hours later with Kieran sounding stretched thin and apologetic, had understood that the silence was not about her. She knew all of that. It still made Saturday afternoon feel like standing in a room with the walls gradually moving inward. Serena stayed out of her way through the middle of the day. Amara heard her on the phone in the sitting room. Long calls, the voice kept low, the words not quite audible. She heard the name of at least one of the men from the previous afternoon's visit. She couldn't hear enough to know what was being said, and she made herself not try, because there was a version of today that still ended without full catastrophe, and she needed to stay inside the boundaries of what she could actually prove. At 4 in the afternoon, Serena's 3 guests from the previous day arrived again. Amara was in the upstairs hallway when she heard the front door. She looked over the balcony railing and saw the same 3 men from Friday. The ones Serena had tried to have her serve drinks to. The ones who had watched that moment in the sitting room with their blank, polite faces. They looked less polished today, less social. They moved into the house like men who had come for a reason. Amara went back to the bedroom she shared with Kieran, and she sat on the edge of the bed and she tried his phone again. Voicemail. She called Lee. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Jang. Lee, I need to know something and I need a straight answer. Does Serena have authority over household security this weekend? Can she instruct your team to do things? Restrict things? A beat. Longer than comfortable. She doesn't have standing authority, no. But Mr. Jang did indicate, what did he indicate? That she was a guest of the house and should be given appropriate consideration. Appropriate consideration, Amara repeated. What does that mean in practice? It means... Lee paused again. She could hear him choosing. It means if there's a conflict between your preferences and hers, I'm supposed to contact Mr. Jang before acting. And if he's unreachable, then we maintain current status until he's available. Amara closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. All right, she said. There are 3 men in the house right now who arrived with Serena's invitation. I don't know them. I want them logged. Yes, ma'am. She hung up. She looked at her phone. The photos still in her camera roll, 12 images that felt very much now like the only concrete thing she had. And she made the decision that felt simultaneously like the right one, and like the beginning of something she couldn't undo. She was leaving. Not for good. Not in defeat. She was going to take the photographs, get to a hotel, and wait for Kieran to call back from a location where Serena could not affect what happened next. Where she wasn't stuck in a house with 3 men she didn't know, and a woman who had already shown her hand and was running out of patience. She pulled a bag from the closet. She was 3 minutes into packing when the bedroom door opened without a knock. Serena stood in the doorway with one of the 3 men behind her, tall, mid-50s, the kind of face that said he had been employed for things that weren't written down. His name, she would learn later, was Gant. He had worked for the Jang family for 11 years. Not for Kieran, for Serena. A distinction that had been quietly maintained below everyone's line of sight. Going somewhere? Serena asked. Hotel, Amara said. She didn't stop packing. I'll let Kieran know. I don't think that's a good idea. I didn't ask. Amara. Serena stepped into the room. Gant stayed in the doorway. Those photographs on your phone constitute confidential family financial records. If they leave this house, in your bag, in your camera roll, in any form, it creates a legal liability. I'm sure you understand that. They're evidence of financial fraud, Amara said. I don't think legal liability applies the same way when... Gant! The man moved into the room. Amara straightened up from the bag. She looked at Gant, then at Serena. She understood, clearly, simply, with no room left for interpretation, what was happening. This was not a conversation anymore. This was not even a confrontation. This was containment. Serena wanted her in this house, away from a phone line she could use freely, away from any external contact, until she could reach Kieran first and construct the version of events that she'd already built in her head. And she had just brought a man into Amara's bedroom to make that happen. "You need to leave my room," Amara said to Gant. Her voice was completely even. "Both of you need to leave my room." "Give me the phone, Amara." "I will not give you the phone." Serena looked at Gant. He held out his hand toward Amara. "I'm going to say this once," Amara said, and she was not performing calm now. She was not managing her tone for diplomatic reasons. She was simply calm, in the way that happens sometimes when a situation has escalated past the point where emotion serves any useful purpose. "If you touch me or my property, I will file a police report. Not through Kieran, not through the family, through an outside precinct tonight, from a phone that isn't mine if necessary." Gant looked at Serena. Serena held his gaze for a moment. Then she made a small gesture, barely a movement, just the shift of 2 fingers, and he stepped back to the doorway. She looked at Amara. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Watch me," Amara said. She zipped the bag. She slung it over her shoulder. She walked to the door, and Gant was still there in the frame, and she looked at him with the same absolute steadiness, and he moved, slowly, with the controlled resentment of a man who has been told to let something pass that he doesn't believe should pass. And she walked through, down the hall, down the stairs, through the marble foyer, her bag over her shoulder, her phone in her hand, her heart somewhere between her throat and her chest, doing something that wasn't quite panic, but was in the vicinity of it. She was 10 feet from the front door when she heard Serena from the upper landing. "Marco." Not Amara's name. Gant's from the other team. The front gate. Family security concern. And the front door? Automatic, connected to the estate system, clicked locked. Amara stopped. She stood in the foyer with her bag on her shoulder and the locked door in front of her and 3 men moving quietly into positions around the edges of the room, and she understood, with a crystalline and terrible clarity, that she had just run out of space. This was no longer about the apron on the counter. This was no longer about humiliation or cruelty or a sister-in-law with an old grudge. She had photographs that proved financial crimes, a husband she couldn't reach, a house she legally lived in and was now apparently trapped inside, and a woman standing on the stairs above her who had decided, sometime between Friday morning and this moment, that the safest solution to her problem was not to talk her way out of it. Serena came down the stairs slowly, one hand trailing the banister, and she stopped at the bottom and looked at Amara with an expression that had finally dropped every layer of social performance. What was underneath was not rage. It was worse than rage. It was patience. "Sit down, Amara," she said. "We're going to wait for Kieran together." Amara did not sit down. She stood in the middle of the foyer and she looked at the locked door and she looked at Serena and she thought about the 12 photographs on her phone and the filing cabinet drawer left almost but not quite latched. And she thought about the apron on the kitchen counter, and she understood now, with perfect hindsight, that none of it had been careless. The unlocked drawer, the dismissed staff, the guests, the apron, the escalating pressure. All of it had been building toward this, toward a moment where Serena could stand in front of her own brother and say, "She stole your records. She was trying to leave. We had to stop her." Amara Whitfield Jang had walked into a trap that had been laid before Serena's car ever came through the gate, and the door had just locked behind her, and Kieran's phone was going to voicemail, and the front gate was secured, and there was nowhere left to go. She stood very still. She breathed. And quietly, without moving her lips, without changing the expression on her face by a single degree, she began to think. Amara had been still for 30 seconds before she moved. Not still like someone frozen, still like someone listening, to the room, to the positions of the men around its edges, to the particular quality of silence that a space takes on when multiple people in it are waiting to see what one person does. She had learned that kind of listening from 7 years of attending dinners with Kieran's associates, evenings where every pause in conversation carried a subtext that had nothing to do with what was being said out loud. She had sat at those tables and smiled and watched and absorbed, and Kieran had once told her on the car ride home from one of those dinners that she was the best reader of rooms he had ever encountered. She thought about that now. She read this one. Gant was at the door, the front door, the one that had clicked locked, positioned close enough to respond, but not so close as to make the situation obviously physical. That was intentional. Serena didn't want obviously physical. Obviously physical created problems, created witnesses, created the kind of story that was hard to reshape later. The two other men from the sitting room were at the periphery, one near the hallway that led to the kitchen and the back entrance, one near the base of the stairs. Not blocking, positioned. There was a difference, and it was the difference between a wall and a net. The net had gaps. She wasn't looking for a gap right now. She was looking for time. "All right," she said. Serena, still at the bottom of the stairs, watched her. "All right," she repeated. "I'll wait," Amara said. She set her bag down. Not dropped it. Set it. The way you put something down when you're choosing to, not when you've given up. She set it beside the ornamental table near the foyer wall, the one with the ceramic vase Kieran had bought in Seoul on a trip she hadn't been on, the year before they met. "But I'm not sitting in this foyer. I'll be in the library." Serena considered that for a moment. The library had one door, one window, facing the east garden, 3 floors up from the ground. It was, from a containment standpoint, a better room than the foyer. "Fine," Serena said. Amara walked to the library. She was aware of the man near the hallway shifting as she passed, not following her, just tracking. She closed the library door behind her and she stood on the other side of it for exactly 4 seconds, breathing, and then she moved. Her phone first. She opened the photos, all 12 images still there, undisturbed. And she did something she should have done the night before. She opened her email and she drafted a message to an address she rarely used, an account she'd created during her pre-Kieran life and had never closed, connected to a server that had nothing to do with any Jang family network. She attached all 12 photos. She typed a 2-sentence body. "Documents found in Jang estate study Friday night. My name is Amara Whitfield Jang, and today is Saturday, October 14th. She addressed it to her own account and to her sister in Atlanta, and she hit send before she could think about what she was starting. The send animation completed. She exhaled. Then she went to her contacts and she looked at a name she had not called in 3 years. Not because of any falling out, simply because the life she'd built with Kieran had its own gravity, and some people from before got left in orbit. The name was Diane Osei. She was an attorney. She was also the woman who had been Amara's roommate for 2 years after graduate school, who had come to Amara's wedding, who had sent flowers when Amara's mother died, and who had said, at that wedding, leaning close during the reception with champagne in her hand, "If you ever need me, the professional version of me, you call." Amara had laughed then, the kind of laugh that means I hope I never have to. She hadn't needed to. Until now. She pressed call. It rang, once, twice. She was calculating what she would say to voicemail when Diane picked up. "Amara?" A slight surprise in the voice, 3 years of silence, a Saturday afternoon, neither of them the type for random calls. "Hey, what's—" "I need 2 minutes," Amara said, keeping her voice below the level that would carry through the door. "I'm in a situation, and I need to tell someone who can do something with it if necessary." A pause. Then the professional version of Diane clicked in. Amara could hear it, the shift. The same shift Amara herself made sometimes when something stopped being personal and became operational. "Talk." Amara talked. 2 minutes, exactly. She covered the documents, the photographs, the emailed copies, the locked door, Gantt, the name Serena Jang. She kept it factual, and she kept it fast, and she did not editorialize. When she finished, Diane said, "Do you feel physically threatened right now?" "Not direct, but the door is locked from outside control and there's a man posted near it." "Okay, I'm going to call someone. Give me 20 minutes. Keep your phone on and try to make sure they don't take it." A beat. "Are you okay?" "I'm functional," Amara said, which was the truest thing she could offer. "That's my girl," Diane said, and hung up. Amara sat in the library chair and waited. 12 minutes later, the library door opened. Serena walked in alone, which was a statement that she didn't need Gantt in the room to have this conversation. She closed the door behind her. She stood with her back against it, arms not crossed. She was too controlled for crossed arms, which was a defensive posture, and Serena didn't do defensive, just her hands loosely at her sides, her weight settled, her face composed. "I want to show you something," she said. She held out her own phone. Amara looked at it. On the screen was a text message thread. The contact name at the top was Kieran. The most recent message, timestamped that morning at 10:47, read, "Serena, I know you're at the house. Just need you to make sure nothing gets complicated while I'm finishing up here." Amara can be sensitive about family business. You know how to handle it. Amara looked at the message, then at Serena, then at the message again. Amara can be sensitive about family business. You know how to handle it. She said nothing. Serena watched her read it with the expression of a person who has played a card they've been holding for a long time. He texted me this morning, she said. Before you called him, before you sent the text. He already knew I was here, he already knew there might be friction, and he asked me to manage it. She paused. That's what I'm doing, managing it. Amara looked at the screen again. The text was there, time-stamped. Kieran's name at the top. She knew his number, had memorized it years ago, the way you memorize things you use constantly. And the number in the thread matched. She thought about the word sensitive. She thought about 7 years of being careful, of absorbing the small injuries without calling them injuries, of managing her own reactions so that she would not become the difficult one in the story. She thought about all the times she had not called Kieran over things involving Serena because she was afraid of being called sensitive. And here was the word, in his own text, to his sister. Can I see the full thread? She asked. You've seen enough. I'd like to see the context. The context is what I just showed you. Amara looked at her. Serena, if Kieran asked you to handle things, then handle them by unlocking the door and letting me leave. Because what you're doing right now isn't handling anything. It's holding me here against my will, which is something he did not ask you to do and would not ask you to do. Serena pulled the phone back. He trusts my judgment. Then exercise it. I am, she said. Sit down, Amara. Amara did not sit down. They stood on opposite sides of the room, and the text message sat between them like a third person, and Amara made herself think clearly about it. She made herself look at it without the emotion that wanted to flood in. The specific cold hurt of seeing her husband's word for her, sensitive, used as a tool against her by the woman who had been trying to diminish her for 7 years. She looked at it clearly, and something didn't fit. Kieran didn't text like that. She knew how he wrote, terse, specific, punctuation optional, zero verbal fat. The text Serena had shown her had complete sentences. A dependent clause. Amara can be sensitive about family business. Kieran, when he texted, would have written, Amara gets weird about family stuff, or, more likely, just don't let it get complicated, with no mention of Amara at all. She had read enough of his messages over 7 years to know his written voice the way she knew the sound of his walk in the hallway. That text wasn't him. She didn't say this. She filed it, quietly, precisely, behind her eyes. And she changed the subject. You said Kieran approved the subsidiary accounts, she said. A year ago, personally. Serena blinked at the shift. Yes. Then you can show me that approval. Documentation. Email, memo, something with his signature. A pause. Fractional. Those records are private. You just showed me a private text message to make a point, Amara said. Show me the approval documentation and I'll stop asking about the accounts. Serena said nothing. You can't show me, Amara said, because it doesn't exist, because he didn't approve them, because the whole point of the subsidiary structure was that he wasn't supposed to know about it until the money was already moved, and the only name on the paperwork was yours, except that you needed a fallback, someone who could be handed to the auditors as the person who found the records and tried to run, which is why you've spent this entire weekend making sure I look guilty. She paused. How am I doing? Serena's expression didn't break. But something in the room changed, some quality of the air, the way a held breath is different from regular breathing even when you can't see it. You're guessing, Serena said. I'm reading, Amara said. There's a difference. Serena walked to the library's single window and stood with her back to the room for a moment, looking out at the east garden going gray in the late afternoon. When she turned around, the careful surface had been replaced by something more direct. Still controlled, but direct. What do you want? She said. It was such a naked question that for a moment Amara didn't answer. What do I want? She repeated. From this marriage, from being in this family. Serena's voice was flat now. Not cold, not warm, just the voice of someone who has stopped performing and is asking a real question, which was almost more unsettling than the performance. Because I have never understood it. You don't need his money. You have your own. You don't need his name. You had a career before him. You sit in this house, and you manage his household, and you attend his events, and you swallow everything my family throws at you, and you never break, and you never leave. What is it? What are you here for? Amara looked at her for a long moment. I love him, she said. Serena stared at her. That's it? She said. That's usually enough reason, Amara said, when it's real. Something moved across Serena's face then, quick and complicated and gone before it could be named. But Amara caught the edge of it. It looked for half a second, almost like grief, like someone looking at a thing they had never had and had stopped believing existed. Then it was gone. The phone, Serena said, her voice was back to operational. I need you to delete the photos. No. Amara, no. Serena crossed the room in 5 steps, and she held out her hand, and she was not asking. Amara's grip tightened on the phone. She thought about Diane. 12 minutes. She needed more time. If I delete the photos, she said, what happens? Serena's hand stayed out. Then we wait for Kieran together, like adults. And when he gets home tomorrow evening, I tell him there was tension this weekend and we let him mediate. And the accounts are a family matter that doesn't concern you. They concern every member of this family. You are not... Serena stopped. The room went absolutely silent. Amara looked at her. Finish the sentence. Serena's jaw was tight. Her hand was still out. Finish it, Amara said, and her voice was very quiet and very clear. Say what you've been trying to say for 7 years. I'm standing right here. You are not blood, Serena said. Flat. Final. Like a door closing. You are a marriage, and marriages end. Amara stood with that for a second. It landed the way real things land. Not with a dramatic crash, but with a weight that settles into the body and stays. Kieran's parents weren't blood when they met either, she said. Eventually, they were family. That's how it works. Kieran's mother was Korean. There it was. The thing that had been in the room every time Serena had looked at her for 7 years, finally sitting in plain air between them. Not dressed up, not implied, just out. Amara breathed once, carefully. I know, she said, and she welcomed me into this family before she died. I have the letters. Would you like to see them? Serena's hand dropped. The 2 women looked at each other across the library, and the window light was going dimmer now, the afternoon contracting, and everything that had been accumulating since Friday morning was in this room with them, taking up space. Then Amara's phone rang. Both of them looked at it. The screen said, Kieran. Serena moved first, fast, faster than Amara expected, reaching, and Amara turned her body and answered the call in the same motion, pressing the phone to her ear before Serena could reach it. Kieran. Amara. His voice was road noise in the background, a moving car. I saw your messages. Negotiations fell through about an hour ago. What's happening? Serena had stopped moving. She was standing 2 feet away, close enough that Amara could feel the tension coming off her, and her eyes were fixed on the phone. Serena is here, Amara said. She dismissed the weekend staff on Friday, locked the front gate and door about 20 minutes ago, and there are 3 men in the house I don't know. A silence on the line that had a different quality from the Saturday silence. This was the silence of someone processing fast. She locked the gate, he said, and the front door. Automated lock from the system panel. Another silence. Then, put her on. Amara held the phone out to Serena. Serena looked at it. For the first time in 2 days, she looked genuinely uncertain. Not managed uncertain, not performed uncertainty, but actually suspended between what she had planned and what was happening. She took the phone. Kieran, she said, and even now, the voice was controlled. I can explain. Amara watched her face as she listened. She couldn't hear what Kieran said, but she watched what it did to Serena's face, and what it did was remove, piece by piece, the architecture of composure that had been the governing feature of her expression all weekend. Kieran talked for a while. Serena said nothing. Her jaw moved once. Her free hand at her side closed into something that was not quite a fist, but wanted to be. When he was done, she said, she went through your private records. She photographed... More talking from the line. Serena's mouth closed. She held the phone back out to Amara without looking at her. Amara took it. Yes. I'm 40 minutes out, Kieran said. Don't do anything. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming home. The gate? I'm unlocking it from here right now. You can leave if you want to. I'd rather you stay, but it's your choice, and I'm not telling you what to do. She thought about Diane's call, about the 20 minutes, about the attorney on the other end of a line somewhere figuring out what calls to make. She could leave. She could walk out the front door in the next 5 minutes. She looked at the bag she'd packed. She thought about the filing cabinet and the 12 photographs and what would happen to those documents if she left the house before Kieran arrived. "I'll stay," she said. She hung up. Serena was standing by the window again, her back to the room, very still, in the way of someone who has just had the floor shift beneath them and is recalibrating their balance. Amara set her phone down on the library table. She sat in the chair. She picked up the book she'd been reading 3 days ago, when the weekend was still just a weekend, and the apron was still just an apron, and nothing had locked yet. She didn't read it, she held it, and she breathed, and she waited. The longest 37 minutes of Amara's life proceeded with a strange, exhausted quiet. Serena left the library at some point. Amara heard low voices in the hallway. Serena and Gant, the conversation brief and clipped, and then the sound of footsteps on the stairs, and then nothing. The house had a particular quality of sound when its occupants were trying not to make any, and right now it sounded like everyone in it was thinking very hard. Amara texted Diane. "Kieran called. He's coming home, 40 minutes. I'm staying in the house." Diane texted back. "I'm keeping the line open on this. Name the men if you can." Amara texted back. "Gant. That's the only one I have." She thought about the text Serena had shown her. Amara can be sensitive about family business. You know how to handle it. She had been holding the certainty that it was forged, turning it over, checking it from different angles. The more she examined it, the more confident she was. Kieran's number could be spoofed. She didn't know how exactly, but she knew it was possible, had heard Kieran's own associates discuss it in the context of security concerns. Serena had 11 years of family access, of knowing what to mimic and what to approximate. But there was also the other possibility, the one she was not completely willing to dismiss, that the text was real, that Kieran had sent it, that sensitive was a word he had used out loud to his sister on a Saturday morning. She sat with that possibility the same way she'd sat with hard things before, directly, without flinching, without immediately reaching for an excuse or an alternative reading. She sat with it and felt what it felt like, and she decided that whatever Kieran had or hadn't said to his sister that morning, it did not change what she had found in the filing cabinet. It did not change what Serena had done with those documents or what she had planned to do with Amara. The conversation about sensitive was real, and it was going to happen, and she was going to have it with her husband when he got home, and it was going to be uncomfortable for both of them. That was tomorrow's problem. Tonight's problem was the locked door, which was now unlocked, and the man named Gant somewhere upstairs with Serena, and the photographs on her phone, and the fact that Kieran was 37 minutes away and getting closer. She heard the gate chime at what her phone said was 6:43. She heard a car on the gravel. She heard the front door. She did not move. She sat in the library chair and she listened to the footsteps cross the marble foyer, heavier than Serena's, a man's weight, confident, unhurried, the walk of someone who knows every inch of the floor he's crossing. She heard him stop somewhere in the foyer. She heard his voice, low, 2 words she couldn't make out, probably to whoever was still positioned near the entryway. She heard a door close and then footsteps again, coming toward the library. The library door opened. Kieran Jang stood in the doorway in his travel clothes, the dark charcoal suit, rain on his shoulders, his hair slightly damp at the temples. His expression was the one she associated with his most operational state, not angry, not soft, not performing anything, just present, fully present. The way he got when a situation required his complete attention and he was giving it. He looked at her. One long look that covered her face, her posture, the bag by the foyer table visible through the door behind him. He took in everything in the room the way she took in rooms, reading it, filing it. Then he said, "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. He crossed the room and he looked at her again, close now, the up-close version of the same read. And she looked back at him and neither of them said anything for a moment. And then he sat down in the chair across from her. "Tell me," he said. She told him. From the beginning, from the moment Serena arrived Friday morning to the dismissed staff to the guests to the apron on the counter. She told him about the study and the filing cabinet and the photographs. She told him about Serena's version of a conversation, about the shell companies, about the authorization forms with Serena's name. She told him about Gant and the locked door and the gate. She told him about the text. The one Serena had shown her from his number. When she described the text, Kieran's face changed. The operational stillness broke just at the edges. Not into anger, into something more precise than anger. "Show me what you photographed," he said. She handed him her phone. He went through the images slowly, one by one, and she watched his face while he did. She had spent 7 years learning that face. She knew the difference between the expressions he showed and the ones he tried not to. She watched him go through 12 photographs, and she watched him get progressively more still, the way water gets still right before it's about to be disturbed. When he handed the phone back, he sat for a moment without speaking. "She told you I approved this," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "I didn't." "I know." He looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because you would have told me. You tell me things you don't have to tell me. It's one of the reasons I married you." A pause. "Also, the authorization forms are dated 3 months ago, and Serena's been tense since August. If you'd approved something that large, you wouldn't have been tense. She would have been." He was quiet. "She also showed me a text from your number," Amara said, "that she said you sent this morning, about me." She paused. "It didn't sound like you." "I didn't send any text today. My phone's been in a briefcase since 8 this morning, in a room with other people." His jaw shifted. "She spoofed the number." Amara nodded. The room settled. Then Kieran stood up, and his face was exactly what she had hoped it would be, and also exactly what she had been afraid it might not be. Clear. Not confused, not divided, not weighing loyalties. Clear. "I need to talk to Serena," he said. "Kieran." She looked up at him. "Before you do, there's something else." He waited. "She said something to me," Amara said. "In this room, a few hours ago. I want you to know she said it, not to make it a bigger thing than it is, but because you should know what has been in this house this weekend, underneath everything else." She paused. "She said I'm not blood, that I'm a marriage, and that marriages end." Kieran stood very still. "And she said," Amara continued, "that your mother was Korean." She watched his face. She was welcoming me to understand what that implied. The stillness in him now was a different quality from before. This was not operational stillness. This was the stillness of a man holding something in that could not be allowed to move yet because if it moved, it would move too fast. "I know," he said. "I know you know," she said. "I just wanted to make sure it was said, out loud, between us." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Stay here." And he walked to the door and he went upstairs. She heard him knock on the blue room door. She heard it open. She heard his voice, low, controlled, the register he used when he was furious, and had decided that fury would be expressed through absolute precision rather than volume. She couldn't hear words. She didn't need to. She sat in the library chair. She looked at her book, still in her hands, unopened since Friday. She opened it to a random page and she looked at the words and did not read them. And outside the window, the east garden was entirely dark now. The October night having arrived without ceremony while everything else was happening, and somewhere in this house that was also her house, the conversation that should have happened years ago was finally taking place. She turned a page she hadn't read. The words blurred slightly. She realized, exhausted in a way that went past tired and into something structural. The exhaustion of having been alert for 60 straight hours inside a situation that required her to be right and calm and deliberate at every moment, because there was no margin for anything else. She was still holding that exhaustion, turning the unread page, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Kieran's footsteps, lighter, faster, the footsteps of someone who had been dismissed from a conversation rather than finished with one. And then she heard the front door open, and she heard it close, and a moment later she heard a car on the gravel, and then the gate, and then silence. Serena was gone. Amara sat in the silence. She looked at the window. She looked at the door. She thought about what came next. Not tonight. Tonight was almost over, and survival through it had cost enough. But what came after? The investigators. The accounts. The documents. The conversation with Kieran about sensitive, about the years she'd absorbed without saying, about what it cost to be this careful for this long in a family that had never once made it easy. She thought about all of that. And then Kieran was in the doorway again, his jacket off now, his tie gone, looking like a man who had just said things that couldn't be unsaid and was standing in the aftermath of them. He looked at her. She looked back. "She's leaving Chicago," he said. "Tonight?" Amara said. "No, permanently." A beat. I told her what the alternative was. Amara set her book down. "What did she say?" Kieran looked at the floor for a moment, and she saw it. The thing he didn't show people. The thing she had earned the right to see after 7 years. The cost. The particular cost of cutting something out of yourself that has been there since you were a child, even when it needed cutting. "She said," he started, and stopped. He tried again. "She said," his voice was rough now, rough in a way it almost never was, "that you took me away from her." Amara looked at him. "Did you tell her that was wrong?" she asked. "I told her," he said, "that nobody took me anywhere, that I walked toward something worth walking toward." He looked up. "And then I told her about the accounts and what the investigators were going to find, and after that she stopped talking about you." Amara nodded slowly. She stood up. She walked to where he was standing in the doorway, and she stopped in front of him and she looked at his face, at the exhaustion in it, the rawness, the precise combination of someone who had done a right thing that was also a devastating thing and was not pretending it was easy. She put her hand on his chest. He put his hand over hers. They stood like that in the library doorway, in the house that was theirs and was quiet now. And outside, the October night was doing what October nights do, cold and complete and entirely indifferent to what had happened inside, which was not a small thing and was not over yet, but was, for this moment, still. She thought, this is not the end of it. Tomorrow, there are investigators and accounts and hard conversations and all the things I said nothing about for 7 years that need to be said now. She thought, this is also not nothing. This is him here. This is the door unlocked. She thought about the apron on the counter. She thought about pushing it back. She thought, I would do it again. They didn't sleep much that night, not because of fighting, not because anything between them was broken or unresolved in the way that keeps two people on opposite edges of a mattress staring at separate ceilings. They didn't sleep because the house had a specific quality to it now. The quality of a place where something large has happened and the walls haven't finished absorbing it yet. Every room felt different. The foyer where the door had locked, the library where Amara had sat alone for 37 minutes. The blue room upstairs, empty now, Serena's things still in it, because she'd left without packing, just coat and keys and the particular speed of someone who has been told something that leaves no room for collecting belongings. Kieran was awake at 2 in the morning. Amara knew because she was awake too, lying beside him in the dark, and she could tell by his breathing, the quality of it, the intervals, that he was looking at the ceiling. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, the text she showed me. Yeah. You're going to need to document that you didn't send it, for the investigators. I know. A pause. Lee's already pulling the system logs, full estate record from the past 72 hours. Serena dismissed the household staff through the main system. She used her access code. That's going to show up. Another pause. So is the gate lock. Amara was quiet. She used your access code, she said. She has one. Had one. His voice was flat in the way it got when he was working something through and wasn't done yet. I gave it to her 3 years ago when she was managing some renovation work on the estate while we were in Tokyo. 3 years. Amara had not known about that code. She had known Serena had a key to the house. That was visible, established, had been used Friday morning, but not that she had system access. Not that she could lock doors from a panel. Not that she'd had for 3 years the ability to do tonight from any point in those 3 years. She filed that away. Not as a wound, as information. The accounts, she said. How bad is it? A long pause this time. I don't know yet, he said. The structures she used, the subsidiaries, I'm going to need an outside forensic accountant. Someone completely disconnected from our existing firms. His jaw moved in the dark. Because I don't know yet how deep the firm involvement goes. Whether she was working alone or whether someone in our accounting structure was covering for her. Amara thought about that. About the specific fear it represented. Not just fraud, but the possibility that the fraud had roots inside the infrastructure Kieran trusted. That the people who were supposed to catch something like this had either missed it or helped it stay hidden. How long do you think it's been going on? She asked. The documents you photographed go back 8 months, but the structures, setting those up takes time, planning. She didn't start this in February. He stopped. I think she's been building towards something like this for closer to 2 years. 2 years. Amara did the math against her own memory. What Serena had been like 2 years ago versus now, whether there were things she'd attributed to normal, difficult family friction that were actually the behavior of someone constructing an exit strategy from a family she'd already decided to rob. The memories didn't resolve into a clean answer. They rarely did. Get some sleep, she said. Yeah. Neither of them did. Sunday morning arrived without ceremony. Gray again, the sky the same flat overcast as Saturday, the October weather having settled into a committed sulk. Amara made coffee. Kieran was already on the phone when she came downstairs, standing at the kitchen window in the same clothes he'd arrived in, because neither of them had thought much about clothes, and speaking in the low, clipped register he used for conversations that were about problems rather than people. She poured 2 cups. She set one on the counter beside him, and he looked at her with a brief nod of acknowledgement without breaking the call, and she took hers to the table and sat. She checked her email. Diane had sent 2 messages overnight, the first at 11 p.m. confirming she'd spoken to a contact in the county attorney's office. Nothing formal yet, just flagging. The second at 6 a.m. reading, call me when you're awake. Things moved faster than expected. She called her. Diane picked up immediately. Okay, so, your email last night, the one you sent yourself and CC'd me on. Yes. Here's the thing, the account you sent from, the old one, the pre-Kieran one, that server logs metadata, timestamps, device ID, IP address. I know, that's why I used it. Verifiable send time. Right. Except, and this is the part where I need you to just listen without reacting, someone else knew that too. A pause. Amara, I got a call at 3 in the morning from a lawyer I've met twice. He represents Serena Jang. He informed me that his client has filed a complaint with the Illinois State Police alleging that you accessed and copied confidential corporate financial records without authorization, and that the complaint includes your emailed photographs as evidence of the theft. The kitchen was very quiet. She filed a complaint, Amara said, last night, hours after Kieran sent her away. She went from that house to an attorney's office. A beat. She didn't leave Chicago, Amara. She regrouped. Amara set down her coffee cup. Carefully. She looked at the table surface, the grain of the wood, the small imperfections in it that she'd stopped seeing years ago and was now seeing again because her eyes needed somewhere to go while her mind did what it needed to do. Serena had not retreated. Serena had counterattacked. She had taken the one piece of evidence Amara had produced to protect herself, the emailed photographs, the time-stamped proof of what was in those documents, and she had flipped it into the instrument of Amara's prosecution. She had turned the evidence of fraud into evidence of theft, and she had done it in the hours between leaving the estate and dawn, which meant she had planned for this contingency. She had known that if Kieran came home and believed his wife, she would need a way to reframe everything that had happened as Amara's crime rather than her own. She had been ready. What does the complaint allege exactly? Amara said. Her voice was steady. It surprised her. Unauthorized access to private corporate financial records. Unlawful copying and transmission of proprietary documents. She's also alleging that you went into the study specifically because you'd been looking for leverage against the Jang family. She's framing it as intentional, premeditated. She has affidavits from 2 of the men who were in the house this weekend. Gant, and one of the others from the sitting room. 2 affidavits from men she didn't know, attesting to a version of events that had Amara as the architect of something deliberate and wrong. Diane. Yeah, those men work for Serena. They're not independent witnesses. I know, that argument will matter in a courtroom. It will matter less in the next 24 hours while the state police are deciding whether to open an inquiry. Because right now what they have is a complaint with photographs of corporate documents in your email, and what you have is your word and your husband's support. And his support is going to be read by a lot of people as not exactly neutral. Amara looked across the kitchen at Kieran, still on the phone at the window, his back to her, the line of his shoulders. She wants the photographs buried, Amara said. If there's an inquiry into me, the documents become evidence in my case instead of hers. They get tied up. The fraud investigation gets complicated by a competing allegation. That's exactly what she wants, Diane said. She's buying time. If she can get enough mud in the water for long enough, she can move whatever assets aren't already frozen and be somewhere the Jang family's reach doesn't extend before any of it comes to trial. Amara thought about 2 years, about the patience that kind of planning required, about a woman who had sat at holiday dinners and birthday parties and family functions for 2 years, building quietly, waiting, ready. What do I do? Amara said. Right now? Don't talk to anyone from the state police without me present. Don't delete anything from any device. Don't even think about it, because deletion creates its own problem. And tell your husband, because whatever resources he has that can move faster than a state agency, now is the time. She hung up. She looked at Kieran. He had turned from the window and was looking at her with the expression she'd come to recognize as the one he wore when he'd overheard enough to understand the shape of a problem. He ended his own call. Serena filed a police complaint, Amara said. A silence. Against you, he said. Against me. Last night. After she left. She watched his face process it. She's using the photographs I sent as evidence of theft. She has 2 affidavits from men who were in the house this weekend. Kieran set his phone on the counter. He stood very still for a moment in a way that she associated with him making decisions rather than feeling things, and then he picked his phone back up and made a call. When it answered, he said 4 words. I need Nathan. Now. And then he was back at the window and his voice had gone to the register she almost never heard. The one that was not Kieran, her husband, not Kieran who made bad jokes about Mrs. Park's dumplings, but the one that had built an empire on a principle that nobody touched his family without a response. She sat at the table. She drank her coffee, which had gone cold. Nathan Cho arrived at the estate by 10:30 Sunday morning. Amara had met him twice before, once at a function, once briefly at the house. And both times she had formed the impression of a man who was intelligent in the particular way of people who are paid to solve problems that cannot be solved through ordinary means. He was 50-something, compact, with the kind of stillness that read as patience until you were in a room with a problem, and then it read as something more deliberate. He was Kieran's attorney in the formal sense and significantly more than that in every practical sense. He sat across from Amara at the dining room table with a legal pad and a pen, and he asked her to tell him everything, beginning to end, in the exact order it occurred, without editorial. She did. It took 22 minutes. He didn't interrupt. He wrote in small, precise handwriting, and when she finished, he looked at his notes for a moment before looking up. The email, he said, the one you sent to your own account and to your sister. Yes. Walk me through exactly what you attached and what you wrote. She did. The subject line? I didn't put one. Just attached the photos. He wrote something. And your sister, she received it. Yes. I confirmed with her this morning. Has she shown it to anyone? No, I told her not to do anything with it until she heard from me. Nathan wrote more. The 12 photographs. How clear are they? Readable? Clear enough to read the company names, the transaction amounts, the authorization signatures. I had the flash off, but I was close to the documents. And the authorization on every form is Serena's signature. Not a stamp, not a digital signature, her actual handwritten signature. Everyone. He nodded slowly. He turned to a new page. Here's where we are, he said, and he spoke with the same complete sentence clarity he'd apparently used his entire career. The complaint Serena filed is procedurally legitimate but substantively weak. The primary problem for her is that evidence of a crime discovered in the course of accessing a shared family space by a legal resident of that space is generally admissible and does not constitute unauthorized access. You live in this house. You have documented access to every room. The filing cabinet was not locked. She left it unlatched. You didn't break into anything. She'll argue I didn't have clearance to the business records specifically, Amara said. She can argue that. A court will ask why a legal co-resident of the property was being detained against her will by a non-resident, which is what the gate lock amounts to, and whether that detention had any connection to the financial irregularities in those records. The detention actually helps you because it establishes that Serena had a motive to prevent you from leaving with what you'd found. Amara looked at him. Can you move faster than the state inquiry? He looked back at her with something that wasn't quite a smile. The financial irregularities in those accounts represent potential securities fraud, tax fraud, and misappropriation of business assets. Those are federal concerns. A federal inquiry moves in a lane that a state complaint cannot easily block. He turned another page. I've been on the phone with Kieran since 6 this morning. We've already identified 2 of the subsidiary companies in your photographs as entities registered in Delaware that filed with federal oversight 2 years ago and then went quiet. The irregularities in those filings are already visible to anyone looking. Is anyone looking? They will be by this afternoon. Amara sat back in her chair. She thought about Serena at an attorney's office at midnight, filing a complaint with a calculated precision that had clearly been prepared in advance. She thought about the 2-year timeline Kieran had estimated. She thought about an apron on a kitchen counter, placed with the specific deliberation of someone who needed a particular kind of confrontation to go on record. She wanted me to react badly this weekend, Amara said. It wasn't a question, but it came out like one. Nathan looked at her. Tell me what you mean. The staff dismissed, the guests she tried to make me serve, the apron. She looked at the table. She needed footage of me being aggressive or out of control or threatening, something she could show Kieran, show anyone, that contradicted the version of me that the people in his life know. If I'd yelled, if I'd grabbed her, if I'd done anything in front of those guests that looked unstable, she would have had witnesses, Nathan said, to a version of you that supported her characterization. And when that didn't work, Amara said, she went to plan B, used the photographs I took as the evidence of my instability instead. She's thorough, Nathan said, and he said it the way you say something you respect against your will. She's been planning this for 2 years, Amara said. She's very thorough. The call came at 2:17 in the afternoon. Amara was in the sitting room. Kieran was in the study. The one with the filing cabinet, going through records with Nathan and an accountant Nathan had brought in, a woman named Serena Park, no relation to the housekeeper, who spoke exclusively in numbers and had been in the study for 3 hours and had not yet raised her voice. Amara had offered her coffee twice and been turned down both times, which she took as a sign of professional immersion. She was answering emails she'd ignored for 3 days. Ordinary emails, the kind that accumulated while your life was busy being something else. Grocery invoices and a note from a gallery she'd been talking to about an auction and a forwarded message from her sister in Atlanta that read, "Are you okay? What is happening? Call me with 4 question marks," which was her sister's style. Her phone rang. Unknown number, Chicago area code. She almost didn't answer. She was aware that everything she said on any phone could now be relevant, and she had Diane's instruction running in the back of her head. "Don't talk to anyone from the state police without me present." She answered anyway. "Mrs. Whitfield Jang." A woman's voice, professional, neutral, the voice of someone accustomed to delivering information without attaching emotion to it. "My name is Detective Reyes, Illinois State Police. I'm following up on a complaint filed last evening. I'd like to ask you a few questions." "I have an attorney," Amara said. "Her name is Diane Osei. I'd prefer she be present for any conversation with law enforcement." A brief pause. "Of course. Can you provide her contact information?" Amara gave Diane's number. "We'll be in touch," Detective Reyes said. "In the meantime, are you currently at the Jang estate?" Something about the question. Something about the way it landed. Not procedural, not routine, something that had a different weight. "Yes," Amara said. "Why?" "We've received a second filing this morning," the detective said. "I can't share details, but I want to make sure you're aware that the situation has developed and that you may want your attorney to reach out to us proactively." A second filing. "What kind of filing?" Amara said. "I'm not in a position to say right now. Please contact your attorney." The line disconnected. Amara looked at her phone. She stood up, walked down the hall, opened the study door without knocking. Kieran looked up from the desk. Nathan looked up from the chair. The accountant didn't look up from her laptop. "Serena filed something else," Amara said. "State police just called. A second filing this morning. They wouldn't tell me what it is." The room processed that in 3 different ways. The accountant's fingers paused on her keyboard without stopping entirely. Nathan set down his pen with the particular placement of someone giving his full attention to new information. Kieran's face did the thing it did, going still and operational. And then he picked up his own phone. "Who has eyes on Serena right now?" he said into it. Not to Amara. To whoever was on the other end. A pause. "Since when?" Another pause, shorter. Shorter. That's not possible. We have... He stopped. His jaw tightened. Find out. He ended the call. He looked at Nathan. She's not at her attorney's office, he said. She left 2 hours ago. The address she gave them as her current location doesn't exist. Nathan was very still. She's moving, he said. She's been moving since midnight, Kieran said. The second filings. It's not another complaint against Amara. It can't be. She wouldn't waste time on that now. He looked at the accountant, who had finally looked up. How much could she move in the last 18 hours from the accounts we've identified? The accountant looked at her laptop. She typed. She scrolled. She typed again. She said, the 2 Delaware subsidiaries processed transactions this morning, early, before 6 a.m. She paused, reading. Combined transfer, $4.3 million. Wire to an account in... She scrolled. I'd need more time to trace the destination. It's going through at least 3 intermediate accounts. $4.3 million. Out of the estate's connected holdings, through subsidiaries that should have been dormant, in the early hours of a Sunday morning while Kieran was asleep in his own house believing that the situation was contained. The second filing, Amara said. Everyone looked at her. She was thinking. She was standing in the doorway of the study and thinking fast, and something was assembling in the back of her mind. All the pieces of the weekend, all of Serena's movements, all the patience and planning, assembling into a shape she didn't quite have yet but was getting close to. She needed us looking at her all weekend. She needed us focused on the house, on the confrontation, on the photographs. She needed Kieran to come home early. Kieran looked at her. She knew about the negotiation, Amara said. She knew when it was, who it was with. She's been in your calendar for years. She knew where you were this weekend, and she knew approximately when you'd be back. She wanted me home early, Kieran said slowly. She wanted you home tonight, Sunday evening, which is when you were supposed to arrive. Amara stepped into the room. Think about it. If she'd kept this low, if she'd just been mildly difficult, if she hadn't dismissed the staff, if she hadn't pushed me into finding those documents, you would have come home tonight to Serena being pleasant and me being tense about a difficult weekend and nothing on the table that required immediate action. She accelerated it. She pushed too hard, too fast. The apron, the guests, locking the door. That was too much. That was not her plan. She looked at Kieran. Something changed. Something made her move faster than she intended. The room was very quiet. Nathan said carefully, what would make her accelerate a 2-year plan by approximately 48 hours? Amara looked at the accountant. The Delaware subsidiaries, when did they first appear on any kind of regulatory radar? Any inquiry, any flag, anything? The accountant typed, scrolled. Her expression shifted slightly. Not dramatically, but enough. There was a preliminary flag from the SEC's automated monitoring system, she said. Filed Thursday. Thursday. The day before Serena arrived at the estate, the day before the apron. She got flagged, Amara said. She found out Thursday that the accounts had been noticed. She needed the money moved and she needed a story in place before anyone came looking. She stopped. She needed me to already be in trouble before the investigators arrived. She needed the frame around me to be established so that when the accounts got scrutinized, there was already a documented trail suggesting I was involved. Kieran was on his feet. The second filing, he said to Nathan. It's not a complaint, it's a referral. Nathan's face changed. She referred the SEC flag to the state police, he said, with a narrative that puts Amara at the center of the irregularities. She's not buying time, Kieran said. She already moved the money. She's closing the frame. She needs the investigation pointed at this house, at Amara, before the federal inquiry. Nathan's been building can establish the actual timeline. The accountant had gone back to typing, faster now. The wires this morning, Nathan said. If we can trace them before the funds are converted, how long? Kieran said. Hours, maybe less. Depends on the intermediary banks and whether they're domestic. Kieran looked at Amara. She was still standing in the doorway. She was looking at the filing cabinet, the one with the drawer that had been not quite latched, the one she'd found on Friday night that had started all of this. She was thinking about 12 photographs on her phone and an email sent to herself at 1 a.m, and a woman who had been planning for 2 years and had just moved $4.3 million out of reach. She thinks she's already won, Amara said quietly. Kieran looked at her. She hasn't. I know. Amara looked at him. But we have to move right now. Not in an hour. Right now. Kieran picked up his phone. He made 3 calls in 7 minutes. The calls were brief, specific, the language stripped of everything except information and instruction. After the third, he set the phone down and looked at Nathan. The federal referral is going in today, he said. Not tomorrow. I can have the filing ready in… How long? Nathan looked at his watch. 4 hours. 3, Kieran said. Kieran, 3, Nathan. Because in 4 hours, those wires are going to be in accounts that are going to be significantly harder to freeze. His voice had the quality now that it got at the far end of patience, where everything that wasn't essential had been stripped away. 3 hours. Nathan closed his legal pad. 3 hours, he said, and picked up his phone. Amara stepped back from the doorway. She went back down the hall. She sat in the sitting room again, in the chair she'd been in when Detective Reyes called, and she looked at the window and the gray October sky behind it, and she breathed. Her phone was still in her hand. She looked at the 12 photographs in her camera roll. She had sent them to herself, to her sister, and now they were in the hands of Nathan's team and the accountant and moving toward a federal filing. They had traveled from a filing cabinet that was not quite latched to the architecture of an actual legal response. And all of that had happened because she had not given Serena the phone when she asked. Small decisions. The weekend had been a sequence of small decisions, each one unremarkable in isolation, each one adding weight to the next. She called her sister. Her sister answered on the first ring. Amara, talk to me. I'm okay, Amara said. It's complicated, but I'm okay. What do you need? The email I sent you. Don't delete it. Don't forward it. Don't open the attachments on any device connected to a shared network. Just leave it exactly where it is. Done. Already done. Amara, her sister's voice shifted. Do you need me there? She thought about the house, about Kieran in the study with Nathan and the accountant, about Serena somewhere in Chicago with $4.3 million moving through intermediate accounts towards somewhere outside reach, about Detective Reyes calling back, about the 3-hour window closing around a federal filing. Not yet, she said, but stay close to your phone. She hung up. At 3:45 in the afternoon, the accountant walked into the sitting room. She stood in the doorway in the way of someone who has information and is deciding how to deliver it. The wires, she said. 2 of the 3 intermediary accounts are domestic. We have them. She paused. The third is offshore. It's going to require a separate process. How much is in the third? Amara asked. Approximately 1.2 million. 3.1 recoverable. 1.2 that would require more. Not everything, but most of it. Thank you, Amara said. The accountant nodded and went back to the study. At 4 p.m., Nathan appeared in the sitting room doorway. He had his jacket on, which meant he was about to leave. The federal filing is going in, he said. It will cite the Delaware subsidiaries, the Thursday SEC flag, the Sunday morning wire transfers, and the photographs as supporting documentation. It will also include the estate security logs showing the gate lock and the dismissal of staff, which established that an attempt was made to prevent documentation from leaving the premises. Amara looked at him. And Serena's complaint against me? Will be substantially undermined by a federal filing that establishes her as the subject of a fraud investigation. Her attorney is going to have a difficult conversation with her tonight. He picked up his briefcase. This is not over. I want to be clear about that. There will be a process. It will take time. But the frame she was trying to build around you is not going to hold. He left. The house was quiet again. At 5 p.m., Kieran came and sat beside her on the sitting room couch. He didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at his hands, which was something he only did when he was done being operational and hadn't yet figured out what came next. She called me, he said. Amara looked at him. When? 20 minutes ago, while Nathan was finishing. He was still looking at his hands. She said she just wanted me to understand. That she didn't do this because she hated you. She did it because she was afraid. Afraid of what? He looked up. His face was raw in the way it had been last night, the cost visible. Of being left, he said. She said that I was the only person in this family who ever… He stopped. He tried again. That when I married you, when I started trusting you with things, she watched what that looked like, and she knew she didn't have it, with anyone. And instead of… Instead of dealing with that, he stopped again. Amara looked at her husband, at the weight of a complicated family on a face that tried not to show weight. She burned it down instead, Amara said. Yeah. The word came out rough, worn. They sat in silence for a while. Then Amara's phone lit up on the coffee table. Not a call. A news alert. She almost didn't look. She looked. The headline was 3 lines. Financial fraud allegations. Jang family holdings. A name. But it wasn't Serena's name. It was Kieran's. She stared at the screen. The alert had a timestamp of 5 minutes ago, meaning it had gone out while Nathan was still in the building, while the federal filing was in process, timed with a precision that was not accidental. Someone had given a story to a financial reporter, and that reporter had posted it, and the story named Kieran Jang as the subject of a potential fraud investigation linked to irregularities in subsidiary accounts connected to his holdings. Not Serena. Kieran. Amara showed him the screen. He read it once. His face went to a place she had never seen it go, past the operational stillness, past the controlled fury, into something that was simply, flatly, devastated. Because he understood immediately, the same way she had understood, what this was. The third wire. The 1.2 million going offshore. That was the part they hadn't recovered. And while they'd been focused on the domestic accounts, while Nathan was filing, while Kieran was on 3 calls, Serena had made a 4th call. To someone with a byline. With a story already written. Ready to post the moment the accounts were flagged. The moment the inquiry became real. The story named him. Not because it was true. Because if the story named him, every investigation that followed would have to address the story before it could get to the truth. Every federal inquiry would arrive pre-contaminated. Every reporter who covered the next 6 months of this would start from a headline that said, Kieran Jang, fraud, before it said anything else. Amara looked at him holding her phone, at the headline on the screen. She thought about 2 years of patience, about an apron on a counter, about a woman who had not run and had not retreated, but had, from the moment Kieran sent her out of this house, been executing the final phase of something she'd built long before any of this weekend. Serena Jang had not lost. Not yet. She had simply moved the battlefield to somewhere that hurt more, and she had done it in the last 5 minutes. And Kieran was sitting on his couch in his own house holding a phone with his name in a headline and the expression of a man who has just understood that the thing he thought was over has only just now truly. Kieran set the phone down on the coffee table like it was something that might detonate. He set its screen up, which meant the headline was still visible, still sitting there in clean dark type against a white background. Jang Family Holdings under federal scrutiny, CEO Kieran Jang, named in subsidiary fraud probe. The timestamp said 5:03 p.m. Nathan had walked out the front door at 4:58. 5 minutes. Serena had waited 5 minutes. Enough for Nathan to be in his car, enough for the filing to be submitted, and therefore irrevocable. Enough for the window of quiet reaction to close. And then she had made the call that sent the story live. Amara was watching Kieran's face. She had watched it do a lot of things over the course of this weekend. She had watched it do a lot of things over 7 years. She knew its vocabulary. But this, what it was doing right now, she had not seen before. It was not anger. It was not the controlled operational fury of a man used to solving problems through application of will and resource. It was something more fundamental than that. It was the specific expression of a person who has just discovered that the floor they have been standing on was not what they believed it was, and that the fall is already in progress, and that there is no wall close enough to grab. His sister had just put his name in a fraud headline. Not his company, not the family holdings abstractly. His name. He sat on the couch, and he breathed and he looked at the phone and did not pick it up. Kieran, Amara said. He looked at her. She had been through 60-some hours of the worst kind of careful. She had been dismissed, contained, threatened, used as a scapegoat for someone else's crime, and she was tired in a way that went to the bone. But she was looking at her husband's face right now, and what she saw there was not something she could leave alone. She gave that story to someone she's had in her pocket for a while, Amara said. This wasn't improvised. She had a reporter waiting. The story was already written. I know. Which means she planned for the possibility that you'd come home early. She planned for you believing me. She planned for the federal filing. Amara paused. Kieran. This is her failsafe, not her plan A. Her plan A was for the money to move quietly and for me to be the convenient name when auditors came looking. When that fell apart, she went to plan B. The police complaint, the frame. When that started falling apart too, she went to this. She looked at the phone. This is everything she had left. Kieran looked at her with the specific attention of someone who is listening not just to the words. She's out of moves after this, Amara said. Unless the story runs wide, he said. Unless it gets picked up. If it goes national, then we answer it. She said it simply, without drama. We answer it with the federal filing, with the timeline, with the photographs, with the estate security logs showing what actually happened in this house this weekend. The story is bad. The truth is better. We have the truth documented. He was quiet. She watched him sit with that. Not the part where the truth was better, because he knew that, but the part that came before it, the part where you have to actually walk into the room where people have read the headline about your name and say that is not accurate, and know that some of them will believe you and some of them won't, and the ones who won't will carry that headline longer than they'll carry the correction. That part. She watched him sit with that. I've spent 20 years, he said, making sure that what people believed about me aligned with what I actually did. Not because I was sentimental about my reputation, because in my world, what people believe about you is operational. It affects every room you walk into, every negotiation, every person who decides whether to sit across a table from you. He looked at the window. She knows that. She does, Amara said. She built her attack out of what she knows best about you. Yeah. That's also the reason she underestimated what she knows about me, Amara said. He looked at her. She expected me to react, Amara said, all weekend. She kept escalating because she needed a reaction she could use. She never got one. And then when she went after me legally, she expected me to defend myself quietly through you, to let you handle it, to step back, to be the careful wife in the background while the powerful husband managed the problem. She paused. She's built her entire strategy around two things, knowing you and not knowing me. Kieran looked at her for a long moment. What are you thinking? He said. I'm thinking, Amara said, that Diane needs to call that reporter tonight. Diane Osei arrived at the estate at 7 p.m. She came in the way of a person who has been working since 3 in the morning and has passed through tired into something on the other side of it. A functional clarity that runs on professional obligation when the personal reserves are gone. She sat at the dining room table and she opened her laptop and she looked at the headline that Amara had already pulled up on her own screen. Okay, she said. She read it, all of it. Then she read the byline. Marcus Webb, she said, I know who he is. He covers financial crime for the Tribune's investigative unit. He's not a tabloid guy. He doesn't run unsourced material. She paused. Which means Serena gave him something real, something documentable. She gave him the SEC flag from Thursday, Amara said, and probably some version of the subsidiary accounts, framed as evidence of Kieran's activity rather than hers. And the federal filing that Nathan submitted today? She wouldn't know the full contents. She'd know it was coming. She's connected enough to know when a federal referral is submitted in her brother's name. But she wouldn't have the documentation Nathan built. Amara looked at Diane. Can you get Marcus Webb on the phone tonight? Diane looked at her over her laptop screen. You want to go on record, she said. I want to offer him the better story, Amara said. Because right now he has Serena's version, which is documented but incomplete, and he's going to run what he has. If we give him the full picture, the federal filing, the photographs, the timeline, the estate logs, he doesn't have to choose between a partial story and nothing. He can have the complete one. Diane was quiet for a moment. You understand that means your name is in it, she said, not as a peripheral figure, as the person who found the documents, as the person who was detained in her own home. It's a good story for you, but it's a story about you, and once it's out there, I know, Amara said, there will be follow-up, more reporters. People will want to know who you are independent of being Kieran Jang's wife. They'll dig. Let them dig, Amara said. I've spent 7 years being careful about what people find when they look at me. I'm not ashamed of anything they'll find. Diane looked at her for another moment. Then she closed her laptop partially, picked up her phone, and scrolled to a number. I met Webb at a journalism conference 4 years ago, she said. I have his direct line. She looked at Amara one more time. You're sure? Call him, Amara said. Marcus Webb arrived at 9:15. He was younger than Amara expected, mid-30s, the kind of person who had gotten to investigative journalism early and wore the experience of it in the lines around his eyes rather than in his age. He came in with a recorder and a legal pad and the particular energy of someone who has just learned that the story he filed 3 hours ago is less complete than he believed. He sat across from Amara and Kieran at the dining room table. Diane sat beside Amara. Nathan, who had turned around and come back when Kieran called him, sat at the far end of the table with the federal filing documentation organized in a folder. Amara had taken 20 minutes before Webb arrived to change out of the clothes she'd been in all day. She'd washed her face, she'd made coffee, actual coffee, for the table, because she was that kind of person and no amount of this weekend had changed that. She set a mug in front of Webb when he sat down. He looked at it briefly, then at her, and something in his expression adjusted. A small recalibration, the kind a person makes when a subject of an interview does something that doesn't fit the frame they arrived with. He turned his recorder on. Nathan put his hand on it. Off the record to start, he said. We'll establish ground rules and then you can record. Webb looked at Nathan, then at Amara. Amara nodded. Webb turned the recorder off. For the next 40 minutes, Nathan walked him through the federal filing, the Delaware subsidiaries, the Thursday SEC flag, the Sunday morning wire transfers, the authorization forms with Serena's signature. I used the language of documentation rather than accusation, dates, amounts, account numbers, the procedural sequence of a fraud investigation, and Webb's pen moved steadily across his legal pad. When Nathan was done, Webb looked at the folder. Can I see the filing? He said. You can see the sections relevant to the public record, Nathan said. I'll indicate what's restricted. He slid the folder across. Webb read. He read carefully, the kind of careful that is not speed but precision. Going back, cross-referencing something he'd written on his pad, going forward again. When he looked up, he looked at Amara. The photographs that appear as exhibits in this filing, he said. You took those? Yes. Friday night, in the family study. Yes. Walk me through that night, he said, from the beginning. She did. She told it the same way she'd told it to Nathan that morning. In order, without editorial, factually. She described finding the lamp on, the drawer not latched, the documents. She described photographing them, returning the files, leaving the study. She described hearing Serena's voice behind her in the foyer. She described the apron. Webb's pen stopped. Tell me about the apron, he said. She told him. She told him about the weekend from the beginning. The dismissed staff, the guests, the drinks she was asked to serve, the things Serena had said, and what she had not said in return. She told it plainly. She didn't perform outrage or victimhood. She described events and she described her responses to them, and she let the sequence speak for what it was. When she finished, Webb looked at his pad for a moment. Then he looked at Kieran. When did you know about the accounts? He said. Sunday morning, Kieran said, when my wife told me. Not before. Not before. The subsidiary structures, you had no knowledge of them being established. No. Webb's jaw moved slightly. He looked at the folder. He looked at his pad. He looked at the recorder, which was still off. The story I filed today, he said, named you as the subject of a fraud probe. I'm aware, Kieran said. I filed it based on documentation provided by a source who framed that documentation as evidence of your activity. I understand. That documentation is the same documentation that appears as exhibits in this federal filing, Webb tapped the folder, but framed entirely differently, as evidence of your sister's activity. Yes. Webb sat back in his chair. He picked up his coffee mug, which had gone cold, and held it without drinking from it. I need to verify the federal filing independently, he said. I can do that tonight. He set the mug down. If it verifies, I'm running a correction, not a small one, a full story, with the actual timeline, and a correction to the piece I filed today. He looked at Amara. You're willing to be named? Yes. By name. Amara Whitfield Jang. Your role in finding the documents, your role in the events of this weekend. Yes. He looked at her for a moment. The recalibration again, something adjusting in his read of her. Why? He said. It was a genuine question, not an adversarial one. You could have your attorney handle the correction. You don't have to be in the story. Amara looked at him. Because, she said, for 7 years I've been careful about being visible. I've been careful not to take up space that was uncomfortable for other people. I've been careful about what I said and how I said it and what it might look like and who might use it against me. She paused. I found those documents because I checked the house at night. It's a habit. It's not exciting. It's not a story. But what happened after I found them is a story, and it's a true one. And I'm not interested in letting someone else's version of it be the one that stays. Webb looked at her for another moment. Then he picked up his recorder and looked at Nathan. On the record, he said. Nathan looked at Amara. She nodded. Nathan lifted his hand. Webb turned the recorder on. The correction ran at 11:47 p.m. It was not a small correction. It was, as Webb had said, a full story. 800 words, sourced to the federal filing, sourced to Nathan on the record, sourced to Amara on the record, with a 4-paragraph correction note attached to the original piece and a direct statement from Webb acknowledging that his earlier report had been based on documentation that, in full context, told a different story than the one he had published. Amara read it at the kitchen table with Kieran sitting beside her, both of them with coffee that was for once actually hot. She read her own name in it. She read the weekend described in compressed, factual prose that somehow caught the shape of what it had been without the drama she'd lived inside it. She read Kieran's name cleared in the same piece that had carried it as a question mark 6 hours earlier. She set her phone down. How's it feel? Kieran said. She thought about it. Like when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot you were doing it, she said. And then you breathe and you realize how long it's been. He looked at her. 7 years? He said. She looked back at him. Not all of it, but some of it. He didn't look away. He held her gaze with the same directness he'd held it with in the library when she'd told him about what Serena had said. You are not blood, you are a marriage. And it was the directness of a man who has spent a weekend discovering the cost of things he'd left unexamined. I need to say something, he said. Okay. I knew it wasn't easy. He looked at his coffee. With Serena, with my family. I knew it cost you. He stopped. I told myself it was manageable, that you were strong enough, that you'd come to me if it crossed a line. Amara waited. I used your strength as an excuse not to look, he said. If you'd been visibly struggling, I would have had to pay attention. Because you weren't, I got to call it handled. He looked up. That's not how it should have worked. She looked at him for a moment. The man sitting at his own kitchen table at midnight, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the weekend and everything to do with what the weekend had shown him about a longer timeline. No, she said. It's not. I'm sorry. The 2 words came out without qualification or addendum. No, but behind them. No, however. Just the words and the space she left around them. I know, she said. That's not the same as it being okay, he said. No, she agreed. It's not. But it's a start. She picked up her coffee. We're going to have to keep talking about what it actually looks like, being in this family, what I need, what's been said and not said. She looked at him. Are you willing to do that? Yes. Really willing. Not we'll figure it out willing, actually willing to hear things that are uncomfortable and not immediately try to solve them. He held her gaze. Yes. She believed him. She believed him not because she was naive about how hard that promise would be to keep in practice, but because she had watched him this weekend make a series of choices that had cost him something real, and he had made them anyway. He had come home and heard her. He had stood in a foyer and helped her up. He had picked up a phone and called a federal attorney on a Sunday afternoon and sat in a room for 6 hours dealing with the worst day of his professional life rather than finding a way to manage it that required less of him. I was not perfect. She had known that. Neither was she. But they were here. Both of them. At this table. In this house. After all of that, that was not nothing. The weeks that followed were not clean. Amara wanted to say they were, but she was not a person who made things neater than they were for the sake of a better story. The weeks that followed were complicated and grinding and had the specific texture of consequences working themselves out in real time, which is always slower and messier than the moment of crisis that produced them. The federal investigation into Serena Jang moved forward. 3 forensic accountants spent 8 days in the study with the files and their laptops, and an appetite for detail that made the accountant Nathan had brought in look casual. They found 11 subsidiary structures, not the 6 that Amara had photographed. They found transactions going back 27 months. They found, buried in the deepest layer of it, a signature on a 4-year-old document that was not Serena's, belonged to a former accounting associate who had since left the family's firm and was now being interviewed by federal investigators in a conference room in downtown Chicago. The domestic wire transfers were frozen within 48 hours of Nathan's filing. The offshore $1.2 million took 11 days and the cooperation of 2 international financial institutions, but it was recovered. Not perfectly, not entirely without cost, but recovered. Gant was interviewed. So were the 2 other men who had been in the house that weekend. Their affidavits supporting Serena's complaint against Amara were withdrawn within 2 weeks once it became clear that supporting a fraud defendant's retaliatory complaint was not a position with a good outcome. The state police complaint against Amara was closed. Serena Jang did not leave Chicago immediately. She stayed, which surprised some people and did not surprise Amara at all, because Serena was not a woman who left before she had to, and whatever else she was not a coward. She stayed and she retained an attorney, and she went through the process of the investigation with the same controlled composure she brought to everything, which was its own kind of courage, the kind that Amara could recognize without admiring. They did not speak. There was no conversation between them in those weeks, no phone call, no final confrontation. Amara did not want one and did not seek one. She had said what she needed to say in the library. Serena had said what she'd said. The rest was for attorneys and investigators and whatever Serena was doing in the private hours of her days that Amara was not privy to and did not try to be. Kieran spoke to his sister once, briefly, in the 3rd week. He came home from that conversation quieter than usual and sat in the kitchen for a long time without eating the dinner Amara had put in front of him. Eventually she sat down across from him and waited. She said she doesn't regret it, he said. Amara looked at him. She said the only thing she regrets is that it didn't work. He looked at his plate. She said she'd been watching the family fall apart for years. Our father's bad decisions, the businesses that should have failed, the money that went to maintaining an image instead of actual structure. And she watched me fix it, and she fixed things too, but she never got credit for it because she was a woman, and the name was always mine, and the control was always mine, and she had 30 years of that, and she snapped. Amara was quiet for a moment. Is she wrong? She said carefully. About what it was like for her. He looked up. About being overlooked? About the name always being mine? He paused. No, she's not wrong about that part. Then she wasn't entirely wrong about what she was angry about, Amara said. She was wrong about what she did with it. Yeah. Those are different things. I know. He looked at his hands. It doesn't fix what she did to you. No, Amara said. It doesn't. But it means she wasn't just a villain. She was a person who got ground down by something real and chose the worst possible way to respond to it. She paused. That happens. It doesn't make what she did okay. But it makes it human, and I'd rather understand human things than just be angry at them. Kieran looked at her across the table. How do you do that? He said. Do what? Hold all of it at once. What she did to you and why she did it, and what... Not forgive it exactly, but not reduce it either. Amara thought about that. I learned it, she said. Being in your family taught me to hold a lot of things at once. You have a complicated family. She paused. So did I, before this. I came to this marriage already knowing that people are not simple, and that love and cruelty can live inside the same person, and that understanding why someone hurt you doesn't require you to accept being hurt. She looked at him. I learned it before you. I just practiced it more here. He was quiet. Then he picked up his fork. It was a small thing, but she noticed it the way she noticed small things. He picked up his fork and he started eating, and the quietness around him had changed quality, from the heaviness of something unresolved to the slightly lighter weight of something that had been set down, not permanently, not forever, but for tonight. Mrs. Park came back on a Wednesday. She came in at 8 a.m. the way she always did, with her canvas bag and her coat, and the slightly formal bearing that she never fully relaxed regardless of the circumstances. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the room, checking, the way a person checks a space they've been away from. And then she set her bag on the counter and she looked at Amara. "I heard," she said. "I know," Amara said. Mrs. Park looked at her for a moment. Then she said without preamble, "I should have stayed." Amara looked at her. "She gave you no choice. She was the one who—" "I know what she did," Mrs. Park said. "I still should have stayed." She turned to the stove with the precision of someone ending a conversation that has gone as far as she's comfortable with and beginning the practical work of the morning. "Sit down. I'll make you something." Amara sat down. She sat at the kitchen island and watched Mrs. Park move through the kitchen with the fluency of 20 years. And she thought about the weekend and what it had looked like from every angle she hadn't been able to see at the time. And she thought about all the people in this house, staff and security and attorneys and accountants and one reporter at a coffee table with a recorder, who had all been, in their various ways, witnesses to the thing that had happened here. The thing about being seen, Amara thought, was that you couldn't always control when it happened or how. You could be careful for 7 years, and then one weekend you got a filing cabinet left unlatched and a choice to make in the dark, and after that the scene was going to happen whether you managed it or not. You could try to shape what people saw. You could give it to a reporter and say, "Here is the actual story." But the scene itself wasn't in your hands. She had spent 7 years trying to control being seen. She was tired of that. Mrs. Park set a plate in front of her. Eggs, simply done. Toast on the side. Amara looked at the plate. "Thank you," she said. "You need to eat," Mrs. Park said. "You've been not eating properly for weeks." "I've been eating." "Not properly." Amara did not argue with this. She picked up her fork. On a Sunday evening, 4 weeks after the weekend that had changed everything and nothing and everything again, Amara came into the dining room to find Kieran coming through the kitchen door carrying 2 plates. She stopped in the doorway. He looked slightly, not embarrassed, but aware of himself. The way a person looks when they are doing something deliberate and feel the deliberateness of it. He set one plate down at her usual chair. He set one down at the chair beside it. Not at the head of the table. Beside it. She looked at the plates. She looked at him. "You cooked," she said. "I warmed things up," he said. Mrs. Park left explicit instructions, very explicit, with diagrams. "She left you diagrams." "She doesn't trust me in her kitchen." He pulled out the chair beside hers. "She's smart." Amara looked at the 2 plates side by side at a table that had spent most of 7 years organized around hierarchy. Head chair, side chairs, the invisible geometry of who was presiding and who was present. The table looked different with the plates like that, simpler, like a regular table in a regular house where 2 people sat beside each other because they wanted to. She sat down. Kieran sat beside her. He poured water into both glasses. He looked at his plate and then at her, and for a moment the thing that had been running between them all these weeks, the careful renegotiation of a marriage that had always been real but had been operating around some things that needed to be said, was visible on his face, not as grief, not as guilt, but as something more forward-looking than either of those. "I talked to a real estate attorney today," he said. She looked at him. "About what?" "The estate. The deed." He paused. "It's in my name. It's been in my name since I built it." He looked at his water glass. "I want to change that." Amara was still. "Kieran, you live here," he said. "It's your home. It should be your home in every way that matters legally and practically, not just because you're married to the person whose name is on the paper." He looked at her. "I should have done it years ago. I didn't think about it because I just didn't think." He paused. "I'm thinking now." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about an apron on a counter, about the specific act of pushing it back, about 37 minutes in a library and 12 photographs and a door that locked and everything that came after. She thought about the things that had been said and the things that were still being said, slowly, across kitchen tables and in the dark and in the middle of ordinary days when something surfaced that needed air. She thought about what it meant that the house, finally, after all of this, was being offered to her. Not as a symbol, not as a gesture, but as a correction. A practical, legal, documentable correction to a practical, legal, documentable omission. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay?" "Okay?" she said again. Yes, do it. He nodded. Something in his shoulders came down slightly. The small physical release of a person who wasn't sure how something would land and has found out. They ate. The dining room was quiet in the way it got on Sunday evenings. The week not yet started, the day winding down, the house doing its settling thing that old houses do when the temperature drops outside and the structure adjusts. She could hear it. She had learned to hear it. Halfway through the meal, Kieran said, "Webb called me this morning." She looked up. "The reporter?" "He's writing a longer piece. The full investigation. He wants to know if you'd be willing to talk again." Amara set down her fork. She thought about it. Not long, not with drama, just the actual consideration of it. "What does he want to know?" she said. "What the weekend was like," Kieran said. "From inside, not the legal part. What it felt like to be in the house." He paused. He said the story he has is about fraud, and he wants to also write the story about what fraud looks like when it's dressed up as something else for the people living inside it. Amara was quiet for a moment. She thought about Serena placing the apron on the counter with her slow, deliberate hands. She thought about the way that gesture had been designed, not to demean randomly, but to land on the precise point of maximum insult, calibrated to a woman she had spent 7 years studying. She thought about how much you had to know about a person to hurt them that specifically. She thought about what it said about Serena's attention, about all the years she had been watching and calculating, and about how that watchfulness, turned in a different direction, might have been something else entirely. "Tell him yes," Amara said. Kieran looked at her. "Not because I want people to know what happened to me," she said. "Because what happened in this house is going to happen in other houses, with different names and different aprons and different filing cabinets. And if someone sitting somewhere watching a video or reading a piece finds something in it that makes them notice what's happening in their own life, if it makes one person push the apron back, then yes. Tell him yes." Kieran was still looking at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. He stopped. He picked up his water glass. He looked at it the way he sometimes looked at things when the words weren't cooperating. "I'm glad you stayed," he said finally. "This weekend. When I called and said you could leave, I'm glad you stayed." "I stayed because of the filing cabinet," she said. "I know." "And because it's my house," she said. He looked at her. Something in his face that was not quite a smile but was in the territory of one. "Not yet legally." "It will be Monday," she said. "It will be Monday," he agreed. They sat beside each other in the dining room that had been rearranged by 2 plates moved from one end of a table to the middle of it, and outside the October had given way to November while they weren't paying attention, and the trees had finished what they'd been doing with their leaves and stood bare now against a sky that was clear for the first time in weeks. The house was quiet. Not the quiet of a place where things had been suppressed, where people were careful and watching and waiting for something to explode. The quiet of a place that had been through something and was still standing. The particular silence that belongs to a structure tested and found to be improbably sufficient. Amara picked up her fork. She finished her dinner. The plates stayed side by side, neither one at the head of the table, both of them exactly where they'd been placed, deliberately, practically, without ceremony, by a man who is learning, at 43, that the most important room in a house is not the one with the most power, but the one where you're willing to sit beside the person you chose and say, out loud, without condition, without footnote, "You belong here as much as I do." That was not the end of everything hard. There were still investigators in the building some weeks, still calls with Nathan, still the ongoing procedural grind of a fraud case working its way through federal channels, and the days when Kieran came home with the stripped-down face of a man carrying a complicated inheritance in both hands. Still the conversations, the ones they had committed to, the ones that surfaced something difficult and required them to sit with it instead of managing it away. Still the moment, once, when Amara was passing the blue room on the second floor and stopped in the doorway and stood there looking at the empty room, the bed made, Serena's absence complete, and felt the complicated thing that grief is when it's for something you didn't want and lost anyway. She didn't stay in the doorway long. She went downstairs. She made coffee and she sat at the kitchen island and she thought about what it cost to build something real. And the answer she kept arriving at was, Everything. And the everything was worth it. And the worth of it was not something you felt once and kept. It was something you chose repeatedly, in ordinary moments, at ordinary tables, in houses that were yours because you decided they were. And because you stayed, and because when someone put something down in front of you that was meant to tell you your place, you pushed it back, quietly, without a word. And that was enough.